All right, so we are going to do education today for you.
For just me?
Yeah,
What about
I
viewers?
like to think I'm educated, but you know what? I found out every week I didn't quite know as much as I would have liked to. And that's, in fact, the beauty of wine. Once you do everything blind, there's no hiding. Every day is a new day, and you learn things. I would argue you learn more when you get it wrong than when you get it right.
I agree.
That having been said, I don't like getting it wrong. So anyway, you're on my turf now, my ground, because I love great Sangiovese more than anything else. It's very difficult to make great Sangiovese. And even when you get great Sangiovese grapes, not every single producer who gets given great Sangiovese grapes actually makes great wine out of it. So today we'll talk about some of the elements of Sangiovese and why we've got these three wines here. One of them is Chianti Classico, I explained that, Chianti Classico Riserva, and Brunello di Montalcino. All of them are made mostly or entirely from Sangiovese. Brunello di Montalcino is made 100% by law from Sangiovese Grosso, which is a clone of Sangiovese. Sangiovese Classico is Sangiovese grown in the classical area, the area which became originally most associated with Chianti. That's the area roughly between Siena and Florence, sort of a triangle there. It's beautiful country. It's hilly. I mean hilly. Forests and olives. It's really beautiful country. We'll talk just today about Chianti Classico. The people who make wine outside of the Chianti Classico area will tell you that Chianti Classico is just a region. It's no better or no different from anywhere else. It's just a region. That is not my experience. I don't want to get the wrath, the anger of the people who are not making their wines in Classico. But for me, the best Chiantis I have had are all from the Chianti Classico area. Then we have, inside of Chianti Classico, and Chianti Classico does not have to be made 100% from Sangiovese. They have grapes like Canaiolo, Ceriola. You're also allowed to use non-Tuscan varieties like Merlot and Cabernet, but in very small quantities. Back in the day when Chianti had a bad reputation, when it was cheap and cheerful, and it was sold in these wicker flasks called, not incorrectly, fiasco, because it was a fiasco, then you had a Sangiovese. By law in those days, you had to have white wine, white grapes in there.
Sangiovese.
Yeah, Trebbiano, Malvasia, but you had to have that. So as they decided that Chianti was a place that could produce really excellent quality, I said, let the producers do what they want. Don't force them to use white wine if they don't think white grapes, white wine, will improve the quality of the wine. And so steadily we have seen a renaissance in the quality of Chianti. So much so that today, what was a fiasco is now for me, when they get it right, absolutely where I want to be. Today we're going to look at three different wines, as I just said. Chianti Classico Normale, the Annata, Chianti Classico Riserva, and Brunello di Montalcino. Let's leave Brunello aside, because Brunello, very expensive but very rare. The amount of land that is set aside, allocated, and denominated DOCG, which is the highest level in Italy, Denominazione Originata Controllata e Garantita, and guaranteed. The amount of DOCG land, Brunello, is very small. There's a lot of areas around there where they grow the same grapes but cannot go into Brunello. They don't have the DOCG Brunello. There's Rosso di Montalcino, there's Ombrone, which you can use Bordeaux varieties. So it's a small area, high-priced, full-bodied wines. In fact, relatively new and a very strong American influence in Montalcino. That's not good or bad, it just is. Now, in Chianti Classico Riserva versus Normale is very interesting. In so many parts of the world, you take your very, very best grapes. It might be your best vineyard, it might be your best barrels, but very definitely you look at taking your very best grapes, and those grapes become, you age them for longer, and you put them in your best barrels, and those are the ones that are intended to be whatever they call it, reserve, reserva, whatever it might be. But it's not specifically different from your normale wines. It's that the wines that are reserva are simply good enough to be reserva, and everything else is effectively declassified to normale. Chianti, I would argue, is one of the few places in the world where they actually have a plan for reserva versus normale. The normale is meant to be fruitier, more easily accessible, easier to drink, less demanding in terms of drinking, less demanding in terms of time to wait for it. And the wines are made, they can be released, the normale wines, younger, with a whole lot less exposure to oak. Once you're getting into reserva, the wines have to have oak for a few years and bottle for a year and so on and so forth. You're talking about an altogether more serious wine. So it's not, of course, a lot of this happens, but unlike a lot of places in the world where your normale is simply wine that wasn't good enough to be reserva, in Chianti, very often you've got excellent base wine, but it's young and it's fruity, and it just works better for a different style of wine, because the gut thing about Chianti Normale versus Chianti Reserva, the gut thing is that the wines are intended for a different kind of audience. The Reserva is intended for much more serious drinking, perhaps a little bit of additional aging, and the Normale is intended basically to be drunk almost like an annata. When the wine is released, you drink it and it trades on its fruitiness, but it doesn't mean necessarily that the grapes were inferior to that went into Reserva, just that they suited a different purpose. I think that's, for me, a very important distinction. It's not a perfect distinction, but a very important distinction about the wines of Chianti. And then, not that long ago, they introduced a further level, which was Chianti Gran Selezione. So the people in Chianti, they were saying, the French, and other places of the world, they can have single vineyard wines, and those single vineyards become very, very famous, and we have these special designated vineyards, L'Amor Mobiliero in Piedmont. We don't have that in Tuscany. We want that. So they came up with something called Gran Selezione. Gran Selezione is effectively a super reserva. It's a year longer. In word, it has to be a single vineyard. I have not yet seen the true value of the great Gran Seleziones that I'm sure we're going to see. Remember, this is just codifying something that the top producers could have done anyway. They could always have said, this is our Reserva, and this is our Reserva della Nonne, or Reserva something, And they could have told you, this is a Reserva, but this Reserva is made from vines that are in that place, and that we spent more time, effort and energy on them, more wood, high percentage of new wood, whatever it might be. So it was not illegal for them to make these kind of wines originally, but they wanted it and they got it. In the beginning, I think some of them thought this was an opportunity to say we have a single vineyard wine. It didn't really matter whether the wine was better or not. They thought they could make more money from it. But there were just a few producers like that, and for the most part, that's not true, because the consumers are not stupid. And in the end, they say we're not getting the quality, or we are getting the quality, we pay the money. So that's the whole idea of Selezione. When Selezione was first introduced in California, the Consorzio asked me to, in fact, be a part of that launch, and I made a talk about Selezione. There are some excellent Selezione wines. I would not say that Selezione today is yet where it's going to be. I don't think that when you buy Selezione that it's absolutely a guarantee of better and better quality, but it will be. But it's just not there yet. Okay, we don't have a Selezione in here. I most recently sold the 16 Selezione. I'm sold out of it. And of course the winery is sold out of it. We don't have it. So now we're going to get you to blind taste. I've been talking and talking and talking. What should you expect from Normale?
It's fruitier, easy to drink, younger. What are the classic descriptors for Sangiovese?
Okay, it's classic descriptors for Sangiovese. First of all, the color is never very dark. Sometimes there's a little brown to it. On the nose, one of my friends, fellow MW, he describes it as iodine, like when you walk on the beach. I sometimes see that, but not always. He also describes some of the nose, some of the characteristics as rhubarb. You know the rhubarb when you
rhubarb?
Rhubarb, it's a
very,
very English green leaf.
Oh.
And the British, other people too, stew it and make it into a dessert, even a breakfast. But there's a sort of specific, slightly green character to that. It's almost always lean, somewhat earthy, but not in a style that detracts from its elegance.
And when you blind taste, what do you look for maybe?
Color?
Color is just one thing. Color by itself is not enough. So Sangiovese is not something in Classico that colors very deeply. I mean, I've seen extremely dark Sangioveses grown elsewhere, Argentina, California. But, you know, we're grown in Tuscany, you know, not so much. So then what would you expect from the Riserva?
Has some more oak with more aging.
More oak, more aging, that's by law. So, but now they're looking at something that they don't want this overt fruitiness. They want something that's more serious, more complex. Your better Chianti Classico Riservas are more like vino di meditazione, wine to think about. But certainly if you're not thinking about it, to ponder over it.
Sounds like I'm going to like Chianti Classico more than Riserva.
Than Riserva. Well, we'll see. It may well be the case. And then Brunello, remember it's expensive and it's limited. It has very definite aging requirements, like Chianti Classico Gran Selezione. But for me, they tend to be bigger wines. I find Brunelli usually to be more robust at the slight expense of elegance than Chianti. But we have to remember they are 1/3 to 40% more expensive than Chianti Classico Riserva, and so you have to continuously ask yourself the question, is it worth it?
Okay. What about tannins?
So the Sangiovese is always tannic.
Okay.
The key with tannic variety, when I say tannic, it's not tannic like Nebbiolo from Piemonte or Aglianico from further south. But the key to tannins is how well they were managed and how well they're integrated. The tannins are definitely there. In the best wines, for them to be elegant, the tannins must be smooth and seamless. Doesn't matter how present they are, but they must be smooth and seamless. It's a lot to do with how you grow the grapes, the growing season, and of course how you make the wine. When we're talking about real elegance for me of the great Sangioveses, obviously if you've got rough tannins you lose the elegance. So that's part of great producers. Taste first the Normale, and all of Chianti wines are DOCG, so the highest level appellation in Italy.
It's cherry-like color, a lot of red berries.
But when you say red berries, what kind of berries?
Raspberries, strawberries.
Okay. There's certainly some floral characteristics.
Does floral mean on the nose or on the palate?
It can be anywhere. Okay. I'm entered on the nose. It's good to have a student that likes wine. Taste number 2.
I'm enjoying it.
And what do you see with number 2 that's different?
For the color.
Well, the color was definitely going to be different because number 2 is 5 years older than number 1. It's going to have more slightly earthy characteristics, more degradation at the rim. Can you feel there's more oak here? I can smell the oak on this one. I can't smell it. I think the oak's very well done.
Right.
But I can smell it here.
Just a little bit of.
Yeah.
Feels like fruit's gone a little bit.
It's not really disappeared. It's subjugated into the entire totality of the wine. It becomes not the driving force, but the beat. Because fruit, when it's really, really overt, detracts somewhat, in my opinion, from complexity.
Oh.
The Normale is not meant to be complex. It's not meant to be thought about. It's meant to be drunk. The fruit's meant to be the main player. When you get to Riserva, the fruit of course has to be there, because without great fruit you can never have great wine. But then there's a little bit of oak and there's a little bit of aging. There's tertiary characteristics coming in. It's not the only thing, and it is intentionally downplayed a little to form part of a complex, comprehensive, and more nuanced whole, a bigger thing.
I see. So it's more complex. number 2.
Do you think so?
Mm-hmm.
Is it good or bad?
Number 1 is better for me.
If I'm just drinking the wine by itself, I would still drink number 2.
Oh.
Certainly with food, number 2. But number 1 has plenty of charm. When you go back and you can compare them, it's a very interesting comparison. They both have good acidity, they both have good tannin. The tannins are very well managed. But the fruit jumps out in number 1. Not in a rude or uncouth way, but clearly the fruit is intended to play a big role here. Number 2, the fruit is intended to take its place amongst the rest of the orchestra.
Okay.
And then number 3 is Brunello.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to ask the question, can you smell the oak? Is it more complex? Certainly older.
Not much oak. Nuttier.
What sort of nuts?
땅콩 뭐지?
Peanut?
Peanuts?
I see that.
It's very complex.
It's very complex. It's readier to drink than the others because this one is now 8 years old.
8 years old.
2016.
2016. So the color is totally different.
The colors already show. But the Classico Reserva is also 8 years old.
All right.
Size-wise, is it bigger or smaller than the Reserva?
Size?
Yeah, the body, the weight.
The body.
Yeah.
I think it's heavier, the Brunello.
To me, it's slightly heavier. This particular one is sweeter. It's almost sweet. When you taste it, it's easy to love it
Yes.
compared to the other one because the other one is lean and chiseled, filigreed. Again, to me, it's not as complex, but it's very inviting to drink because of this high impression of sweetness, which is in fact, I believe, alcohol. I think it's a pretty alcoholic wine. All right,
I'm ready.
you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna close my eyes.
No, you step away.
Okay.
Because
Bye.
He doesn't trust your ass.
no, this is too easy, so I'm gonna throw in a Merlot. Is that okay, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's too easy. It's only 3 of them.
Yeah, we don't want it to be too easy for her. Yeah.
Oh, there's something?
Something?
Something.
Okay, let's go.
So when you blind taste wine, you have to use all your senses. Sense of sight, sense of smell, taste. I saw you agitating, but you weren't specifically looking to see whether there were legs and whether the legs showed
did.
color, meaning
I
extract.
didn't. Yeah.
Because
Okay.
it's one of the ways of, it's by no means definitive, but it's one of the ways of thinking about it because generally speaking, the Bordeaux varieties, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Carmenere, Petit Verdot, tend to have, for some reason, extract color. Sangiovese some, Nebbiolo almost none. It's not a definitive thing by any means, but the absence or presence of meaningful extract gives you an indication of what it may be.
Okay.
Likewise, color. Typically, Pinot Noir is lighter. It doesn't have to be, but typically it is. Beaujolais is lighter. Nebbiolo is lighter. Sangiovese is red, but hardly ever opaque, meaning you can't see through it. It does have extract, but very faint.
Almost known.
You have to make use of all of your senses. And then no one thing in a blind tasting is definitive. You need 4 or 5 things that agree with each other, at least 3, but probably 4 or 5. You can be comfortable that what you think it is has got a chance of being correct. Okay. So what we did here, because we know it's too easy for you otherwise, one of these wines is not Sangiovese. One of these wines is Merlot based. You have to find that wine too.
Maybe I found.
Maybe you found it.
I
Okay.
hope.
So you've been through, you've tasted them all, you've looked at them, you've made notes, color, or how the appearance, the nose, and the palate.
Yes.
Okay. So why don't we start with the obvious question? Which one is not Sangiovese?
Number 2.
Number 2 is correct.
Yes.
Okay.
It has red, purple color.
Color is important
Yes.
because color comes largely from the skins of the grape. And if the skins have got more pigments, you're going to get more color.
Oh.
It gets more complicated than that, but in its basic form, that's
And
important.
I could see some extract.
And extract.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bordeaux varieties tend to do that. Syrah. There's many grapes that do.
Okay.
Sangiovese not so much.
On the nose, it has red berries and it got some pencil smell. It smells like Bordeaux. So
And the pencil smell is very often a characteristic of Bordeaux wines. Actually, not so much of Merlot, but Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon. It's got that sort of lead pencil, cedarwood character.
cedarwood. And on the palate, it was very delicious. It got silky tannins. I liked it.
Oh, you liked it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's mainly Merlot, and outside of Pinot Noir, Merlot is known for having lovely mouthfeel.
Okay.
Okay, now we come to the difficult part. You have 3 Sangiovese wines in front of you. Which is the Normale?
Number 3. The color is similar with number 4, so I think number 4 is Chianti Classico Riserva. On the nose, it has bright strawberry smell, so I thought it's Normale. And on the palate, it has good acid here. It's fruity, and I think I got some iodine too.
Okay. Well, it would appear that you're right, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Number
4.
1.
Number 1. I think it's Brunello di Montalcino.
Why?
It's very bright color, and on the nose it has some sweetness in it. On the palate, it has silkier mouthfeel than others, and it tastes like the most aged one, so I thought it's Brunello di Montalcino.
In this lineup, well, you are
Yeah.
correct. Yeah. So it's obvious what then the last one is.
It's Reserva.
Yeah. Same age as the other one, as you
Right.
just said. It feels younger.
Right. Yeah, it has good acid. It has earthiness.
Can you see why that's the Riserva and not the Normale?
On the nose, it has depth than number 3.
Yeah. You got them all right.
A+.
Very good.
Yeah, I'm getting better.
Well, you got a good teacher. Just
right.
kidding. Very, very good.
Master of the wine in
Very,
the world.
very good. For the people that are watching, in 1 minute, make a summary for me of what makes the difference between Normale and Riserva.
Normale was fruitier. It has fruit taste.
I think that's the key. The key is typically Normale would be in a lineup fruitier,
Right.
because that was the intention, and probably in a regular lineup younger. That's not to stop people from aging their Normales for 50 years. But, in a contemporary lineup of wines that are currently available, the Normale would be younger than the Riserva, so it would be a different vintage. But yes, you got it right. So it's fruity. Now the difference stylistically between Brunello and Chianti Riserva, and of course it's very difficult because it changes from wine to wine and winemaker to winemaker and all the rest of it. So
Right.
broad terms from your observation.
Brunello feel like older than the Chianti Classico Riserva.
Yeah, unfortunately that's not fair because whilst it is not older, and this one does feel older, you're 100% right about that, that is not a characteristic. It's a characteristic of Palazzo. It's not a characteristic of Brunello in general.
Okay, then it got more difficult.
Yeah.
Please tell me.
It should be a wine of more gravitas, less overt fruit, more complexity, more things going on, a wine that has to be taken more seriously, and probably a wine that you're starting to think about, what am I going to eat this with or drink this with? Yeah. To give you 4 wines and make you an expert in Sangiovese is impossible, but it's a good start. You just keep doing that, and one day you'll be a consultant to the winemakers of Tuscany.
Okay, I will. Thank you, teacher.
Okay.
I learned a lot.
Okay, cheers. Thank you. Thank
Cheers.
you.
Cheers, viewers. Cheers.
Chin, chin, chin.
Chin, chin.